methods. We would like to start the seminar with the narrative of the
Please.
Welcome to the seminar, everyone. It's a great honor and pleasure to introduce Professor K.K. Mishra, former Vice Chancellor of Utkal University of Culture, Bhubaneswar, and he was also the former Director of Anthropological Survey of India, Kolkata, and National Museum of Maritime, Bhopal.
Let's start. What did you say? No. When we start with this one. And this. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay.
So,
Yes, we said.
we have Professor Nitin Chatterjee, who is the head of Anthropology Department, University of Calcutta. Next, we have Professor Shruti Kanundu. She is the Assistant Professor, Department of Humanities and Social Sciences of Indian Institute of Technology, Dhanbad. Today's seminar will be moderated by Dr. Purichon Bell, Associate Professor of Sociological Research Unit, Indian Statistical Institute. So, we will start off the seminar with Professor K.K. Mishra.
Okay.
Dr. Horishan Mehra, Sociological Research Unit, ISI Kiridi, would be giving us a welcome and an introductory note.
Good morning to all of you. Distinguished delegates on the dais and speakers those who are joining online, our research scholars, and also participants those who are joining online and offline. I wish you excellent that this one-day lecture series is going to be delivered by six distinguished speakers. We have the first speaker, Professor K.K. Misra, Professor Kamalkant Misra, who was a former Vice Chancellor of Utkal University of Culture, and before assuming the charge of Vice Chancellor, he was the Director of Anthropological Survey of India also. He also served as the Director of IGIS for a distinct period. Professor Misra is a well-known, one-reputed anthropologist who was served as a professor at the University of Hyderabad in the Department of Anthropology for about 4 decades. He was also the Dean of Social Sciences, such a distinguished professor, Fulbright Fellow from University from USA, and he will deliver the keynote address. Professor, then we'll have another speaker, Professor Trajectories from Calcutta University. We'll have speakers from IIT Dhanbad, Dr. Shruti Kanungo. We'll have speakers from Tezpur University, and also there will be another distinguished speaker, M. Rumesh Singh, who will be there. Professor M. Rumesh Singh will be joining from University of Hyderabad. So before we start, let me just give you a very brief introductory note about this one-day lecture series. And the title, as all of you know, that emerging trajectories in anthropological and sociological theories and methods. As this topic talks about, like emerging trajectories. So obviously, one thing comes to our mind, being a student of sociology and anthropology, know that the society and culture are dynamic. So since it is dynamic, so we have to actually talk about the social realities. And the social realities today are different what it was decades back. So considering that what classical sociologists or anthropologists talked about theories or explained, these things need to be in fact relooked. Also, we need to come up with new theories and methods. That is one important aspect. Considering the fact that the world is changing very fast and we are witnessing kind of global climate crisis, global warming, migration induced by kind of global warming, climate change, war, and sort of things like that. And there is rapid globalizations, that unprecedented form of globalizations we are witnessing. And the kind of the penetration of AI, ChatGPT in our day-to-day life, everyday life. The kind of biotech, identity politics, and so on. There are several such issues that is in fact, influencing our day-to-day and everyday life. So in these circumstances, it's very important that we need to refocus, focus upon on a very vital topic of emerging trajectories in anthropological theories. There are new contexts that demand fresh perspectives. For instance, I would say that post-colonial theories, as France panel, the rest of the art you might have read it if you are a student of sociology or anthropology. Tomike Bhabha's books and concepts of hybridity, mimicry, and the sort of concepts that he has used, like the third space. So also inviting our deep introspection or kind of new anthropological issues. We are talking about post-humanism. Post-humanism is a kind of new concept. That is because it's a quest for human centrality. Why is this? How this human being is so important? Even in the context of the kind of emergence of new technologies, AI and other kind of things. A kind of critical race theory in sociology and anthropology is very vital also. Like Derek Bell's structural realism. And if you someone of you working on the kind of structural violence also, this is a very important work. And another aspect is that digital culture or digital sociology. I'm very fortunate that one of our scholars, my scholars, in fact, she worked on the social media dynamics of society and focused upon that how this kind of manual castles work, like on network society, has become very instrumental and vital for this present contemporary context. We talk about the digital sociology by Goffman, Manuel Castles, or kind of actors network theory, Bruce Latour, Bruno Latour, sorry, extremely sorry for that. And how this kind of things they talk about that humans or social networks coexist. Humans' existence, cultural influence, sorry, technological influence on culture are very vital. Another important aspects are like how methods are important. That's very vital aspects. Oh, sorry, before that, there is another important aspects. Perhaps Professor Mishra will speak about it. Indigenous epistemologies. Today, we all, I mean, some of our students are working on kind of sacred groups, biodiversity conservations. How these indigenous epistemologies are becoming very vital aspects of Indian polity, society, and kind of administration also. And we are reviving our cultural past also, like how we are realizing that it's very vital for us to understand the indigenous communities' knowledge, traditional knowledge system, indigenous knowledge systems as a whole, and how it is really impacting on the kind of biodiversity conservation, and also at the larger scale, it can also be positively impacting upon this kind of climate change. These are very vital aspects, and methods are evolving also. All of you know that there are new methodological concepts like digital ethnography. Mixed methods we are going to organize in kind of in the first week of September. Big data analysis. Then we are talking about participatory and visual methods. On the that part, we are talking about PR and other important tools. These are very important and the complementary methods that supports to your traditional methods and approaches. And the focus on kind of, inclusivity, decolonialization is very vital aspects. As authors, as scholars of sociology and anthropology, we are more concerned today about the kind of inclusivity. We are more concerned about the voices of the women and other, subaltern communities. We're talking about indigenous subaltern groups, others from different, even the global south, they are being recognized at the world level, even by the Western scholars. There was a time Western scholars were dominating and influencing the kind of the scholarly activities. And you used to be like people from the East used to be considered as inferior or inferiority, but that's the mindset. So now these scholars from global south, including scholar Dr. Arjuna Padurai, is very vital. So scholars like Arjuna Padurai, scholars like there are many such scholars, those who are active with called activism scholars are talking about the kind of Vandana Shiva and in Indian context, there are several others, and many others. They have influenced through their academic works globally. So now we are talking about inclusivity, participation, participatory approaches, and decolonializations. And methodological innovations are very vital aspects. Digital ethnography helps study online communities also. We are talking about how mixed methods, bridging qualitative depth with quantitative generalization. That is very vital aspects. We understand that statistics have a pivotal role in kind of generalizability through kind of sampling surveys, and but the kind of in-depth analysis that we do our ethnographic approach, case studies, participatory captures, and so on, that can actually bridge these gaps. So increasing interdisciplinary linkages, intersectionality is also a very vital aspect. One of our speakers will talk about the intersectionality today. We are talking about critical perspectives of new perspectives of human ecology. Professor Mishra will talk about this. Definitely will touch upon some important vital aspects of this. So these are some of the important highlights that today's, I think, series of one-day lecture series will highlight up. But this is just a beginning. Since we are talking about a series, we started with 6 invited speakers. Obviously, in coming days, we'll start up with another set of eminent speakers. So in short, emerging trajectories in anthropological and sociological theories and methods are not just academic fashion, they are necessary adaptations to new social realities, ensuring anthropology and sociology remain relevant, inclusive, and responsive. So just because I have been given 15 minutes, I thank you very much. So I think we'll have another my colleague, Professor Abhishek Mukherjee, I don't know if he has joined. Looks like he has joined. Yes. Professor Mukherjee.
Are we supposed? Am I supposed to talk now?
Yeah, yeah. So I invite you for a welcome address, Professor Mukherjee.
Am I audible?
Very much.
Oh, I'm very much audible. Thank you so much, and I apologize for not being there. On behalf of the Indian Statistical Institute Grady Branch, I warmly welcome you all. As it's customary for me as the in charge of this branch, I hope you will enjoy your stay. I welcome all the respected speakers, participants, colleagues, and students to this workshop. I'm not an expert in this particular domain. I work in agriculture, hence you have to apologize me for my naivety. But to me, I think the theme of the workshop is very timely. Both the fields, anthropology and sociology, whatever I understand, to me they help us to understand people, culture, society, and the changes happening around us. We are just past the pandemic time, and we can see a lots of digital growth that is happening. I mean, I don't know whether it is positive, whether it is negative, but lots of, even in our personal space, there is a lot of encroachment of digital, I would say pollution in some cases. There are environmental issues that is related to anthropological and sociological aspects as well. And the changes in the governance that have raised important questions. We know in recent times, there are lots of movements going on across the country for, against, whatever it is, which is common trend in our country, I think. This demands a fresh ways of thinking and the new methods to study. And I think this particular workshop that brings together all these different experts from different domains from all over the country and the scholars together, this would probably path a very constructive way of thinking towards this direction. So, I mean, I've gone through the program schedule, and I think we are fortunate to have distinguished speakers with us who will share their knowledge, I'm sure, on topics ranging from ecological anthropology, business anthropology to governance, intersectionality and labor sociology, and various other aspects. So without further ado, I once again welcome you all, and I really want to thank Dr. Behera for taking this forward. He's doing this for some time now, and gives the pleasure that Giridi is, as you know, is a small place. Don't lot of people come generally in Giridi unless and until we organize. So this sort of programs helps our students to also get a little bit of more exposure and learning from different other people. Thank you once again. Thank you very much for your time and coming. And I wish this workshop will be very meaningful and successful. Thank you so much. Can't hear you, Dr. Behera.
So now we should start with our much anticipated keynote address by Professor Mishra. So I've already given introductory to Professor Mishra. So without taking much time, I request Mishra sir.
ओम नीलाचल निवासाय नित्याय परमात्मने बलभद्र सुभद्राभ्याम जगन्नाथाय ते नमः. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I have prayed my Lord to shower blessings on all of you, individual and collective. My esteemed colleagues, Professor Dityendu Chatterjee, who is also one of the resource persons for this wonderful workshop, Professor Kanungo, Professor Haricharan Behra, colleagues, those who are joining online, other colleagues, those who are joining online, research scholars, and students. In 2017, I had come to this campus. It was more than 8 years, and there is a lot of change. Change in many things, but one of the things is that I've seen change in one of my former students, Professor Behra. And I'm more than delighted that Professor Behra has reached the milestone in academics. As a teacher, as a former teacher, I'm so happy. In Sanskrit, there is a small saying that Shishya Ichchate Parajayam. What an ideal teacher should expect from a student. That if the student defeats the teacher, not in war, but in not physical war, but in war in academics, that is the greatest satisfaction of a teacher. Friends, I have no hesitation in admitting that Professor Behra has defeated me by his wisdom, by his academic quality, by his perseverance, by his administrative capability, and that is the reason why we are here. But at the same time, I have got a complaint against him. The complaint is, I should be very fair. The complaint is that he has asked me to talk about human nature relations, that is new directions in ecological anthropology, in 40 to 45 minutes. And he has put me into real dilemma when I am trying to deal with it in such a short time, as we all know that Homo sapiens have roamed on this earth about 500,000 years back. From that time onwards, there was interaction between humans, Homo sapiens, and the nature. So I had to squeeze my lecture of 500,000 years of history into 40 minutes. You can understand how difficult the task is, and therefore I beg your apology right from the very beginning that sometimes I may need to skip over things, and please excuse me, look at the references, and then please pursue your studies, individual studies on the topic of your interest. Friends, what topics I'm going to cover in these 40 to 45 minutes? A lot of them, but then as I said, I have to skip over some of them. First of all, I have to differentiate between ecology and environment. I think it is very important. We use it interchangeably, but there is a conceptual difference. And many people may not be knowing. It's not a crime, but it is better that we know at least now. I shall be talking about ecological anthropology prior to 1950s. I shall be also dealing with a kind of revolution in ecological anthropology by an American anthropologist by name Julian Stewart. Students of anthropology may be knowing, or students of environment may be knowing Julian Stewart as a history maker in environmental studies or ecological studies. Then came the systems approach. It is a kind of chronology actually. Systems approach in ecological anthropology. Then there was another revolution which was brought about by a person called Clifford Geertz, another American anthropologist, on techno-environmentalism. Then many of other colleagues like Roy Rappaport, Andrew Vaida and others, they talked about ritualism in ecological anthropology. Then historical and political ecology, along with time, as Professor Baer has pointed out, that social sciences have undergone such a transformation with time. And similarly, with time also, environmental or ecological studies have also undergone change. History came into existence, politics came into existence in the name of historical ecology and political ecology. Then interpretive and symbolic ecology by anthropologists, ethnoscience and cognitive anthropology, some kind of cognitivism was also brought into the focus. And as Dr. Behra was pointing out, this is a time of Indian knowledge system. Anthropology was never behind this. Much before the present people thinking about Indian knowledge system. We talked about Indian knowledge system also. I'll expose to you the studies on Indian knowledge system or indigenous knowledge system in anthropology. Then I will come to the real focus, that is the contemporary research trends in ecological anthropology. Along with research, as you know, that methods have also undergone transformation. What kind of methods are required for that kind of researches or that kind of approaches? That also I shall discuss in very nutshell. Anthropological contributions to environmental crisis, which is now a global issue, all of us know, in the form of global warming, in the form of, the disaster that scientists have already warned us. What anthropologists have been thinking about it and what are the studies? And most important thing is the scholars, those who are working on ecological anthropology, they might take the benefit of what I'm talking about. I'll be talking about the publications, recent, latest publications in ecological anthropology. And you can see the trend there, that ecological anthropology in 2024, 2025, what kind of topics are covered. And a very crisp future projection of ecological anthropology. So these are all things I wanted to cover, but then I have to wind up. This is an online program. My colleagues must be waiting, those who are the speakers after this. So I have to wind up. I request the coordinator or the moderator to please warn me 5 minutes before my time comes to an end. Time in the sense, not my leaving time.
କଣ ସବଜେକ୍ଟ କଣ ତ ମୁଁ ତଳେ ଛାଡ଼ିଲେ
Now, first of all, sorry. Please tell me, please warn me that what time I should stop. First of all, I shall be talking about the scope of ecological anthropology. I will not go into the details, just the first paragraph I'll read out. The PowerPoint is available with you. It studies the ways in which different human populations adapt to their environment and how this process, I've underlined process. Please remember, this is the difference between ecology and environment. Ecology is a process. We are studying the process of interaction. And environment is an object. What is the environment? We can see all the nature around us, the trees, the animal species.
Sir, I have to copy this. I haven't copied.
It's copied.
I just saw that there was a.
Excuse me. It was, I think it is here. Just copy and project it. I thought he is doing well. Waste time at the beginning. I'm sorry, friends. So I was talking about ecology and environment. Environment are the things around us, where ecology is a process of interaction. We are interacting with the trees around us. We are interacting with the animals around us. We are interacting with even the non-living or non-organic objects around us. This is a process of interaction, and this is called ecology. So environment is different from ecology conceptually, although we have been using ecology and environment interchangeably, which normally many people use. Now, as I go to the beginning of, as I said, 500,000 years of history, which I cannot probably cover, but then I would like to draw your attention to one of the early writers recognized. Go for the first slide. Second one. Yes. The first, the first researcher on exposing the relationship between environment and or nature and human beings was Thomas Malthus. He was not an anthropologist, but then I would say he is a population scientist. And what he said is very, known to all of us. In 1798, Thomas Malthus published essay on population. And for the first time, he said that human populations are limited by the resource base. This is the relationship between the humans and their environment, the humans and the nature. This is the basic thing that he wanted to point out. We'll go to the next slide. And this is the Malthusian graph. All of us are very familiar with this. And he said exactly that when the human population grows in geometric progression, the food supply grows in arithmetic progression. And you know the difference between geometric progression and arithmetic progression. Therefore, at some point of time, there will be a climax, and from the climax, again, there will be a decline. So this is the nature of relationship that Thomas Malthus conceptualized in 1798, long back. Next. I'll come to the early foundation. When I come to the early foundation, I remind you about the contributions of the Greco-Roman scholars of that time. And there are so many of them. Hippocrates, Plato, Aristotle, Cicero, Vitruvius, Tacitus, and so on and so forth. Most of them had a kind of notion that was that the nature determines the human culture. Not only the human culture, but also people talked about human personality, how you should be like, your morality, your politics, your government, your religion, material culture, biology, and so on and so forth. All these things are determined, quote unquote, determination or determinism. So there was a kind of cause and effect relation. The cause is the environment and the effect is the human personality, human government, human religion, and so on and so forth. Please see the books for details, and probably there is no time to go into the details. Next came possibilism. This came with a very simple idea that this rejected environmental determinism and proposed that environment limits, I underline limits the range of possible socio-cultural forms. There would be a number of options. For example, this is the land, this campus. If it is given to an agriculturist, he or she will have a lot of options to use this land. It could be used in an agricultural field. It could be used at a horticultural field. It could be used as a compost manufacturing unit. It could be used for dairy and poultry and so on and so forth. These are the possibilities, and the culture picks up the possibility, or the human population pick up the possibility. What kind of possibility are variations available for this kind of relationship? So this is called possibilism, and one of the very, very popular trends of possibilism of that time was by Franz Boas, an American anthropologist. He was normally regarded as the father of American anthropology. Franz Boas had a theory called historical materialism or historical possibilism. Most anthropology students know about it. And then his students like Robert Lowy, like Alexander Goldenweiser, Alfred Kruger, Clark Bishler, all of them were trained by Franz Boas and they followed this path. To the anthropology students, I might remind the culture area theory. And that was a product of historical materialism of Franz Boas. That a particular cultural area is different from other cultural area because of the environment factor and its impact on the human culture. Next slide, please. As I said, that a real revolution was brought about by American anthropologist Julian Stewart in ecological studies. Julian Stewart has came out with a concept called cultural ecology. And what was the cultural ecology? That the cultural ecology was like this, that a culture has got, I think the figure has not come out, the picture has not come out for some reason. But then this is a concentric ring or two rings of culture. At the center is the core culture, and at the periphery are the secondary cultural features. This is like, a concentric ring. This is like a circle. And he said that cultures interact with their environments through a process of adaptation, which he called cultural ecology. This is a process of adaptation. And then this was further refined in his book in 1955, The Theory of Culture Change. And the subtitle of the book is The Methodology of Multilinear Evolution. It was published in 1955. Please refer to this book, you will find. He says, what are the cultural cores? What are the elements of cultural core? The subsistence activities, economic arrangements, social, political, and religious patterns, which are closely connected with these arrangements. These are the cultural cores. How can we distinguish between cultures? We can distinguish between the cultures by means of the cultural core. And some people call Julian Stewart as a Marxist. Doesn't matter. But the idea was that subsistence plays a very, very important role in determining the relationship between human and nature. But then what are the secondary cultural features? The secondary cultural features are those determined by purely cultural historical factors like random innovation and diffusion. So by chance, there is some kind of innovation that constitutes the part of the secondary cultural features. Besides subsistence activities, we talk about rituals, we talk about the other things, for example, our food, our dress, all kinds of, these are all cultural elements as we know. These are derived from the core culture. So he was the first to distinguish between the cultural core and the secondary cultural features. Now, after this, between 1950s and 1970s, these 20 years was the time of systems approach in ecological anthropology. From where the systems approach came? It came from biological sciences. Anthropology, as all of us know, that is indebted to biological sciences. The beginning of anthropological theory came from biological sciences. So similarly, this also came from biological sciences, the systems approach. And what is this system? People used a concept called ecosystem. Very often you come across this concept as ecosystem. What is this ecosystem? Ecosystem is it is a system of different parts, organic and inorganic, biome and habitat. They are in approximate equilibrium. It is through the interactions that the whole system is maintained. And this was the beginning of a principle of cybernetics. Those who are familiar with biological sciences, they know this. And in my classroom lecture, I always give this example as a kind of showing the system. This is how a system works. I think some of you were students of biology, at least students of science, or at least in your high school, you must have read about science. What is this? Next, please. Next. Yeah. What is this? This is a benzene ring. How many of you can remember your 9th class science, 9th class chemistry? This is a benzene ring. This is called a compound. Can you see here? What is a benzene ring? It is a compound which is constituted by 6 carbon atoms and 6 hydrogen atoms. How water is formed? Water is also a compound. Water is formed by 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen, but not at random. If you put 2 oxygen in a test tube and put 1 atom of oxygen, it will not give you water. There should be some kind of system that you have to do. And this is the kind of system in a benzene. Look at the 6 carbon atoms. They are not arbitrarily placed. They are placed at a particular place and location. And similarly, the hydrogen. Right? I will not go into the chemistry, but we all know that it becomes unsustainable if you remove 1 carbon atom from its place and put it in the place of the hydrogen. The entire benzene rings will collapse. Right? System is like this. And people thought, one of them was Sir Tunsley, a British ecologist, who said ecosystem concept was one of the earliest uses of a systems approach in science, anticipating later developments in cybernetics and systems theory. Anthropology has brought these things from biology or from sciences, and then they thought that human and nature are at equilibrium. Now we are talking about disaster. Friends, what is disaster? Disaster is nothing but loss of equilibrium or disequilibrium. Because the equilibrium is lost, that is the reason why we are facing the threat of environment. Whether you call it global warming, whether you call it the rise of sea level or whatever things, these are because of some kind of disequilibrium. So between 1950s and 1970s, this was a very popular approach in ecological anthropology. Next, we will come to techno-environmentalism in ecological anthropology. Next, please. Next. Please, those who are working in ecological anthropology, don't forget to see this book. It was published by Clifford Geertz in 1963. This is called Agricultural Involution. This is a case study from Indonesia. What does he say in this? Clifford Geertz showed that intensification of Javanese agriculture, this was focused on Javanese agriculture, could be a result not of population pressure, but of politico-historical pressure. You know that Indonesia had a very peculiar kind of history. It was a colonial country like India. It was, although not governed by British, it was governed by the Dutch. And there were several political reasons, historical and political reasons, by which there was a revolution in Javanese agriculture. This book is all about the revolution, and that is the reason why the title of the book is Agricultural Involution, the process of ecological change in Indonesia. He challenged, Clifford Geertz challenged Julian Stewart's cultural ecological framework of ecological functionalism for ignoring the symbolic and interpretive dimensions of culture. It's not just the interaction, simple interaction between the humans and the nature around them, as proposed by Julian Stewart. He said history also plays a very important role. Polity also plays a very important role. And particularly, I would like to give a small example from India. You remember 1960s, in India, we had also Green Revolution. You know, that was also a kind of agricultural involution in the history of India. And that was because of historical reasons. There was no food for Indian people to eat. We had to beg the United States and other countries for wheat, for our local consumption, because the production was not enough in India. And so therefore, that was the historical reason, and that was the political reason for which agricultural revolutions or involutions take place in different countries. And what Clifford Geertz, being a brilliant anthropologist, what he did, he used an interdisciplinary method. I'm not explaining what is interdisciplinary. People now, Professor Behra talked about mixed method and so on and so forth. But interdisciplinary has also a meaning, and he combined historical, ecological, and cultural analysis to explain agrarian stagnation in the Java and also the ways out of it. You know, and it was Clifford Geertz for the first time who used a concept called a thick description. What you see from the surface, like a field scientist is not enough. What you have to do is that you have to go deeper into it. What is the meaning behind it? And that is the reason why the interpretation of the happenings could be deciphered, could be found out. So that was the kind of contribution of Clifford Geertz, and also he was a critique of the modernization theory. All of us know about this, and I will not go into the detail of it. Around the same time, next please, there was another landmark publication by another American anthropologist by name Roy Rappaport. The title of his book is Pigs for the Ancestors. Some of you might have seen this. Otherwise, you look at your library. This book is a very important contribution. When Clifford Geertz talked about history and quality playing an important role in the relationship between humans and environment or humans and nature, Roy Rappaport, he said rituals also play a very important role. And what was that ritual? His study was mostly used, was from a case study from New Guinea, Papua New Guinea, where the people used to have some kind of festival, some kind of ritual. Basically, they are pig herders. At some point of time, when the pig population increases, as in case of the Thomas Malthus curve, if it reaches a climax, then they become a nuisance. And therefore, people used to have a ritual and slaughter the pigs, otherwise they don't. Otherwise they don't. So you can see here the structure. The structure at the end of the structure, can you read it? The destructive zone. When the pig population reaches the destructive zone, then there is a ritual, and that through the ritual, there is a pig slaughter, ritual pig slaughter, and then the population comes down. And again, the graph goes up in course of time. So this is something like Thomas Malthus' relationship between population and food production. And safe zone is okay. Up to the safe zone, there is no problem. Even the critical zone, people realize the elders of the community call for a meeting and then decide when to have the kind of ritual for the ritual slaughtering of the pigs. So this is ritual as a regulator that was used in maintaining the relationship, maintaining the equilibrium between humans and the nature. Next was the history and quality in ecological anthropology. This was a very crucial time between 1970s and 1990s. Many publications came out around that time because the subject has to transform or has to adapt itself with the incoming challenges. And one of the contributors was William Bailey. He proposed historical ecology, and in 1964, he published a volume called Footprints of the Forest. You can see the picture of the book. Footprints of the Forest, you can see from the library. And he rejected the notion of environment as a static force to which cultures simply adapt. Then what is environment? He says there are 4 cardinal principles of historical ecology. The history of relationship between humans and the nature are governed by 4 cardinal factors. Number 1 is human agency. Humans play a very important role. Anthropologists had a lot of debate that some people when defended the tribal rights over forests, let them cut the forest, let them destroy the forest. But then actually the human agency plays a very important role. Others said that there should be some kind of restriction. Then there is a co-evolution. Culture and environment influence each other reciprocally over time. It's not a one-way process of that always environment influences of culture. It is a bi-way process or co-evolution. There is nothing called a pristine nature. We always talk about the nature was pristine, particularly those who are the advocates of tribal cultures or indigenous cultures. They said that nature was pristine during that time. No, it is not. Look at the history. And history, if you read the history carefully, as a student of history, then you see that how human agency has destroyed the nature at some point of time, at many points of time. Then culture and ecological diversity, that diverse cultural practices often correlate with biodiversity, not its destruction, So therefore, these are the 4 cardinal principles of historical ecology that was very fashionable till 1990s. There have been many Indian studies on ecological history, just a kind of samples I'm giving you. There are so many of them. One of them was, which impressed me, was The Fisher Land, an Ecological History of India, published in 1992. This was published by Madhav Gadgil and Ramchandra Guha, two stalwarts. And Professor Behra was saying that he had invited Professor Madhav Gadgil. He was a real kind of, although he was not an anthropologist, Ramchandra Guha was a sociologist. He's a sociologist, but both of them have joined hands in talking about the history, ecological history in India. Please see the book, This Fisher Land, an Ecological History of India. Also, another book by Gadgil and Ramchandra Guha, Ecology and Equity, the Use and Abuse of Nature in Contemporary India, published in 1995. The Use and Abuse of Nature, 2000. All these books are, these are all samples. I'm not going to the complete list of books that were published. Mahesh Rangarajan, another historian, very well qualified historian, and also an historical ecologist, has I have just two books as reference: Fencing the Forest and Nature and Nation, published in 2015. There was David Arnold, who came all the way from Britain and then he studied Indian forest. The Tropics and the Traveling Gaze, published in 2006 on the ecological history of India. Shivaram Krishnan, who was also an eminent, ecological anthropologist. In 1999, he wrote the book Modern Forest. And there were many other publications on the ecological history of India. We will come to the political forces that influenced the ecological anthropology in the world as well as in the country. Eric Wolf's name is normally taken with much respect when it comes to polity and ecology. He edited a volume called Pathways of Power in 2001. His insistence on connecting ecology to power, class, and history strongly influenced the rise of political ecology, a more critical approach within ecological anthropology. Dr. Behra, in his introductory remark, talked about inclusivity. It is mostly like this, that a section are usually kept away from power. They have no access to the resources, and that was the beginning of political ecology. Eric Wolf's political ecology broadly interrogates these three things. Number one, who controls resources? Is it all the people? Because resources belong to the entire nation. Whether all of them have got equal access? Second, how are environmentalists shaped by political and economic power? The kind of movements that we are witnessing. What is the power behind this? Politics and power behind this. And who benefits from environmental policies and practice? It is meant for somebody, but the benefit goes to somebody else, and we all know. While coming from Ranchi to Dhanbad, on the both sides of the railway track, I saw the devastating nature, the kind of mining that have been going on for whose benefit? Is it benefit of the people, those who are the people of the soil, people of the land? No, it is for some other people. So therefore, Eric Wolf gives a kind of agenda in the book Pathways of Power. Similarly, there were other people, two other samples. Michael Watts, the book is Silent Violence, Food, Famine and Peasantry in Northern Nigeria, published in 1983. India is not the only country. There are other countries also facing the same kind of problem. Then P.S. Blakey has a book in 1995, The Political Economy of Soil Erosion in Developing Countries. These are some of the sample publications on political ecology. But then there are Indian studies as well. So many of them. And in the morning we were talking about Amita Bhaviska and her book In the Belly of the River. This is about Narmada. You know that this is a very prolonged kind of revolution which is still going on. In the Belly of the River, published in 1995, second edition has come in 2004. I don't know, there could be other editions as well. But Ramchandra Guha and Madhav Gadgil had written a wonderful book, Ecology and Equity, which was published in 1995. This is on political ecology. Then Shivaram Krishnan and Arun Agarwal have written Regional Modernities. Vandana Shiva's book on feminism, like Vasudha, Nature, giving a kind of feminine character that was staying alive, was published in 1988. These are all the politics of ecology and excellent books on political ecology for the scholars to have. And these are some of the samples, let me tell you again and again. This is not the complete or exhaustive bibliography of the books. Now, then in 1980, between 1980 and 1990, ecological anthropology took a different turn in the form of interpretive and symbolic ecology. Some of the contributors were, what I'm discussing is one of them was Darrell Posey, who is no more. I had the privilege of working with Darrell Posey. And this is the time that Darrell Posey demonstrated how cosmology, land use practices, and political organization are closely tied to local environmental management. This is the focus. Unfortunately, he passed away very early, and there were other publications also. And as I said, I had the privilege of working with Darrell Posey. Similarly, I was exposed to the writings of Tim Ingold, interpretive and symbolic ecology of Tim Ingold. He had given a new concept. It is called the anthropology of dwelling. And look at this book, the perception of the environment. It is most phenomenological approach to the study of human-nature relation. Yesterday we were talking about phenomenology, and this is very important in anthropological interpretation. And final paragraph, as you see, ecology is not the study of the relation between organisms and the environment, but of the processes, again, processes in which the organism and the environment are continually brought into being together. Otherwise, there would have been some kind of disjunction. Why there is no disjunction? This is a kind of process that Tim Ingold had examined. I had also privilege of listening to Tim Ingold when he was in Scotland, and after that he moved to Ireland. Now, ethnoscience and cognitive anthropology are also important developments from 1990s to the present time. It resurfaces, although initially it was said that cognitive anthropology is no more a kind of valid anthropological theory for various reasons. I will not go into the details, but then it resurfaces again and again. Look at the publications. The best publication probably in my mind was Harold Conklin, when he for the first time talked about Hanunu agriculture, a report on an internal system of shifting cultivation in the Philippines in 1957. It was a report. It was not in the form of a book. But you can see the free copies over internet. Brent Berlin's book, Ethnobiological Classification, Paul Kay and Berlin's book, Basic Color Terms, Charles Frey, Language and Cultural Description, and Stephen Tyler's edited book, Cognitive Anthropology. I have always recommended to my students to read Stephen Tyler's book on cognitive anthropology. And all these publications, all these authors have contributed a chapter to this. Stephen Tyler, for your information, had worked in India. He had worked among the Cons of Odisha, and his doctoral work was on the Cons of Odisha. So he is one among us, Stephen Tyler, ethnoscience and cognitive anthropology. And next, please. We will go to the next phase of ecological anthropology, 1980s to present. And this was the study of environmental knowledge. The United Nations began formally engaging with indigenous knowledge in the early 1980s. And suddenly anthropologists also woke up. Although in 1972, United Nations Conference on Human and Environment in Stockholm stressed on the linkage between indigenous knowledge and cultural diversity. Now it becomes a very, very important area of research among the anthropologists. And this book, as you see, Indigenous Environmental Knowledge and its Transformations, Critical Anthropological Perspectives by Roy Allen and others. This was the time when I was working with Roy Allen. He was my mentor at the University of Kent and Canterbury. To this volume also, although I could not contribute a chapter for this, but you can see the acknowledgement and you will find my name. What did Roy Allen say through this volume? Roy Allen examined how local classification systems are embedded in social and ecological contexts, moving beyond purely cognitive models of ethnoscience. He argued that it is dynamic, it is adaptive, and it is context dependent, not a static relic of tradition, the relationship between indigenous knowledge and culture. Then another book by Ethnographies of Conservation. This was by another colleague, David Anderson. David Anderson in 2003. This was a collection of chapters. It critiques the mainstream conservation narratives. Please see this book, Ethnographies of Conservation. The idea of conservation came after the United Nations became active in protecting indigenous knowledge, in exploring indigenous knowledge, and the natural way or the local ways of conservation. This came into the publication. Michael Dove, again another dear colleague of mine, he wrote a reader. He edited a reader called Environmental Anthropology, a critical reader, published in 2007. It consists of 5 thematic sections: nature-culture divide, relationship between environment and social organization, methodological debates and innovations, politics and practice, and the last one is epistemological issues of environmental anthropology. It's an excellent reader for the beginners, those who want to understand what is environmentalism or environmental anthropology. Paul Silito, who has worked in Bangladesh and in other parts of the country, was also a close friend of mine. He was teaching at the University of Durham, published a book called Local Science versus Global Science 2007. And I had the privilege of working also with Paul Silito when he was working in Bangladesh. He had come to India several times, and then we worked together on certain issues. Indian studies and indigenous knowledge. Those who are working on indigenous knowledge might remember Anil Gupta, who was associated with, not an anthropologist, he was associated with Indian Institute of Management, if anybody recollects, Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, and he started a magazine, an organization actually called Honeybee Organization. And then Honeybee started publishing a magazine called Honeybee Publication since 1990s. It is still being published, and that explores the local level, local knowledge system for the scientists and for the general public. I have got many volumes on indigenous knowledge. I should not talk about myself, but then probably the history will be incomplete without letting you know what are these publications. You may search them in your libraries. One of them was Traditional Knowledge and Contemporary Societies, published way back in 2005. And then Exploring Indigenous Knowledge Systems in India. So these are the 2 volumes which was these 2 volumes were my contribution. And then I'm not going into the details. I'm leaving it to the scholars to see the books and then see what are the contents inside. Now, what is very important at this stage is, and for which Professor Behera wanted me to mostly focus on, is the contemporary trends in ecological anthropology. He also hinted me that some of his scholars are working on this. If you are really interested in ecological anthropology or related issues, please look at the following research agendas, and you may formulate your research project accordingly. One of them was, these are the research areas I am outlining: global environmental changes and their impact. This is how do you study impact? There are different ways of studying impact. A scientist or an environmentalist studying an impact and a social scientist studying the impact of environment are different. They may be supplementary to each other, complementary to each other, but these are different kinds of studies. What we normally focus is how people perceive, how people experience, and how people respond to the global environmental changes. Similarly, climate justice and environmental movements, the power, inequality, and the access to resources. One can study on this also. Most of this is unexplored yet. Environmental sustainability and biodiversity conservation in anthropological research. I'm told that some of you are working on sacred groves. This comes under very much this research agenda, that environmental sustainability, whether sacred groves contribute to environmental sustainability. I have got a full video on this from different parts of the country. From Kerala, it is called Sarpa Kahu. Why it is protected? Here you find in our tribal areas, I think part of this landscape also, there are sacred groves, hundreds of sacred groves, noticed or unnoticed, and they contribute to the basics of sacred groves. They contribute to sustainability and biodiversity. When I was the director of Manav Sangralaya Bhopal, we had maintained dozens of sacred groves on the campus by different communities, and then we continue to maintain them throughout the year by inviting the local communities to perform their rituals. It has become a part of the ritual. It is a part of their culture, and that is how they are sustained. Then the next research agenda is cultural resilience research. This is very much needed, the threshold and the adaptive capacity and so on. Cultures are always resilient, you know. There are threats, but then we don't care for this threat. This is a kind of resilience. On the other hand, we find the way out. So, for example, by 2050, scientists say that most of our coastal cities of the world, including India, Mumbai, and other places, they will be a part of the ocean. They will be part of the ocean. But then people are not really afraid. They are resilient and they are finding out the ways out. Then indigenous knowledge, spiritual ecology, and their application in disaster management. Spiritual ecology has come up as a new area of research, and we have been also contributing to spiritual ecology. Probably sacred growth will be a part of the spiritual ecology as well. Artificial intelligence and its application in understanding human-environment relations, with a note of caution that artificial intelligence is not as helpful as you think. You have to use it with caution. Multi-species anthropology. This is a new area of research. We are not only studying humans and the environment, 5 minutes, humans and environment, we are also looking at the other animals, the plants, microbes, and landscapes as the co-actors in this relationship. This is multi-species anthropology. Ontological and relational epistemology, by rejecting a single view of environment and promoting differential construction of nature by different societies. These are some of the research agendas which probably research scholars can ponder over and think over. But then what is important is also the methods. What kind of method should be used? Interdisciplinary, as Professor Behra said, mixed research method. But then I'm using it with caution, with the rider, that the way we understand mixed is not mixed. It is something different. The mixed research or something beyond, not different, but something beyond. That how ecology, geography, GIS and remote sensing, climate science, artificial intelligence, etc., are all of them emphasize on the co-production of knowledge. This is interdisciplinary method that people have been using now. Ethnoecology and indigenous knowledge methods are people using what I said as cognitive anthropology or ethnoscience. Longitudinal and multi-sided ethnography, this has become very fashionable. Whether people understand or not, they say we are doing longitudinal. But how long, that people do not know. Or what should be the optimum, that people do not know, that we have to be very careful. And multi-sided also, not at one place, and one has to choose various sites. Participatory and collaborative research, like anthropologists have been doing it from the very beginning. Other sister disciplines have grabbed our methodologies, not our, I say, this kind of methodology for their use, very good. But the origin lies in anthropology, bottom up rather than top down approach. And visual and digital ethnography, also Dr. Behra pointed out, this is very important, including audio visual media. We talked about digital ethnography. I think in some other occasion I will talk about it. I don't believe in digital ethnography. Audio visual media, photo voice, and digital storytelling, and so on and so forth. These are some of the methods that ecological anthropologists or people working on environment are using. Now, who are the people, those who have contributed? Just I'm telling their names, only again samples, like Laura Ogden in 2022 wrote a book called Loss and Wonder at the World's End. Please read this. In 2024, Anna Zing, another colleague, and with her collaborators, Field Guide to Patchy Anthropocene, the new nature, that also deserve your attention. And then Julie Friction in 2007 wrote Two Glaciers Listen, Local Knowledge, Colonial Encounters, and Social Imagination. Some of these books are very useful for you, those who show you the new directions in ecological anthropology. Time is not permitting me to go into this. These are the publications. Recent publications in ecological anthropology. I picked up these two, and these will really guide you, or will be the real forces behind you for new kind of research, looking at the new dimensions. One of them is building the critical anthropology of climate change towards a socio-ecological revolution, published as late as 2024. And the authors focus on critical perspectives on climate change and socio-ecological justice, engaging with perspectives from sociology, political science, again interdisciplinary, and the geography of climate change. The book explores various approaches to thinking about and responding to existential threat of an ever-warming climate that humanity faces today. Another book which was published again in 2024 is called Environmental and Ecological Sustainability through Indigenous Traditions, Perspectives from the Global South. One of our colleagues from the IIT Kanpur, Vinay Kumar Patnaik, Dr. Behra must be knowing him. He explores, this is very incredible, explores the environmental and ecological wisdom inherent in some of the indigenous traditions in the developing societies or developing countries like Argentina, Brazil, India, Mexico, Sri Lanka, Thailand, etc., to record their traditions consisting of worldviews or cosmologies, eco-savvy customs, indigenous knowledge system involving community-based occupations and practices, skills and crafts, and so on, that ensure a sustainable world. These are the latest, fresh publications. The publication smell is still must be with the book. So please have a look. What is the future of ecological anthropology? This is the last slide. I'm quoting Morgan, Emily Morgan, 2024. She wrote, I'm quoting her, as we confront the escalating threats of environmental degradation and climate change, the role of environmental anthropology, read ecological anthropology, becomes increasingly critical. Future research in this field may focus on exploring alternative paradigms of development, fostering intercultural dialogue and collaboration, and promoting environmental justice and equity on a global scale. However, environmental anthropology also faces challenges, including the need for greater interdisciplinary collaboration. We are talking about interdisciplinarity, but how do we do that? That is a million-dollar question. Each discipline has its own problems, so we have to see how we can engage ourselves with greater interdisciplinary collaboration, ethical considerations, which is often ignored in working with indigenous communities, and the integration of indigenous perspectives into mainstream environmental discourse. Unquote. Again, another from Emily Morgan, I quote, in conclusion, environmental anthropology offers a holistic approach to understanding the complex relationships between humans and their environments, encompassing cultural, ecological, and social dimensions. By illuminating the diverse ways in which different cultures interact with and perceive the natural world, environmental anthropology provides a valuable insight for addressing contemporary environmental challenges and promoting more sustainable and equitable futures for both humans and the planet. Unquote. Now we are talking about all kinds of, living beings together, living and non-living beings together. But the question is, this is a part of the great Indian Vedic tradition also. When you say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, Vasudha Eva Kutumbakam, everything on this earth, and in the Shanti mantra for peace, we say Jo Shanti, Antarikya Shanti, Prithvi Shanti, Apah Shanti, Aushadhaya Shanti, Vanaspataya Shanti, Vishvedeva Shanti, Brahma Shanti, Sarvam Shanti, Shanti Reva Shanti. Everything peace. So that will be some kind of, some kind of peace comes only when everybody is in peace, not only with the human beings. Thank you, Professor Behra, for inviting, and thanks to all of you. Maybe I have exceeded my time, but I really apologize. And the constraint was because of the human history or the history of relationship between humans and the environment for 500,000 years. It is difficult, as you can understand, how difficult it is to sum up. Thank you.
Thank you. Such a thought-provoking talk. Still, we have 5 minutes in hand. If there is any query from the scholars, then we can take it to the questions. Or any audience from this online this one. Because you can you read out the chat if anything is there. Because yes. So we don't have holiday or then I don't know. It's basically it's very okay. So I don't think there is any from the audience. So, I think we're looking at 15 minutes break. Okay. We'll reassemble here at 11:37. Thank you.